The courtroom was packed, tension thick in the air. Officer Daniels, a veteran cop with a reputation for being smug and condescending, leaned back in his chair with a smirk. Across from him sat a young woman, nervous but determined. He had mocked her before the trial even began, laughing under his breath as he whispered to his colleagues, "She doesn't stand a chance." To him, this was just another easy win. He had been in court countless times, testifying against defendants who fumbled under pressure. But what he didn't know was that today was different. Today, the woman sitting across from him wasn't just any defendant. She was his lawyer. Just weeks ago, Officer Daniels had publicly humiliated her, dismissing her intelligence, even questioning if she could spell her own name. Now, as she rose to speak, his confidence wavered. The woman he underestimated was about to turn the entire case against him. What happened next left everyone in the courtroom stunned. The officer who once laughed at her was about to face the consequences of his own arrogance. But how did she pull it off? And what did she reveal that made him regret everything? Keep watching to find out. Officer Daniels shifted uncomfortably in his seat as the woman began speaking with confidence. Her voice was calm but firm, carrying a presence that demanded attention. He had spent years in this courtroom, but something about this moment felt different. He wasn't in control anymore. Just a few weeks ago, he had encountered her under very different circumstances. She was a young attorney fresh out of law school, eager to prove herself. But when they first met, she wasn't standing in front of a judge. She was standing on the sidewalk, facing him. Daniels had dismissed her instantly, belittling her intelligence, and treating her like she wasn't worth his time. He never imagined he would see her again, let alone inside a courtroom where she would be the one questioning him. Now as she laid out the facts, his arrogance started to crack. She knew things, details he didn't expect her to have. The jury leaned in, listening closely. The judge watched with curiosity. Daniels glanced at his attorney, but even they seemed uncertain. How did she gather this much information? And more importantly, what did she know that could turn the entire case against him? The answers were coming, but he wasn't ready for them. The courtroom felt smaller with every passing second, the weight of the moment pressing down on Officer Daniels. His usual confidence, the smug smirk he carried into every case, had all but disappeared. Across from him, the young lawyer flipped through her notes, her expression unreadable. She wasn't rushing. She was in control, and for the first time in his career, Daniels felt trapped. She cleared her throat and began asking questions. Simple at first, procedural details, standard protocol. Daniels answered with short, clipped responses, trying to keep his cool. But then she shifted gears. "You testified that you followed proper procedure that night," she said, her voice steady. "That you had no personal bias in how you handled the situation." Daniels nodded, but something in her tone made his stomach tighten. "Would you say you treat all civilians fairly, regardless of who they are?" "Of course," he said quickly. Too quickly. She walked toward the evidence table, picking up a document. "Then can you explain why, in this written report, your statement doesn't match the footage we obtained?" The courtroom went silent. Daniels swallowed hard. Footage. He never saw any cameras that night. How much did she really know? Daniels felt a cold sweat creeping up his neck. He had been in court dozens of times, always confident, always in control. But this was different. This wasn't just another routine testimony. This was a trap, and he had walked right into it. The lawyer took a slow step forward, her eyes locked onto his. "Officer Daniels, are you aware that security cameras in the area captured the entire incident from multiple angles?" His jaw tightened. He hadn't seen any cameras that night, or at least, he hadn't noticed them. He forced himself to stay composed. "I acted according to protocol," he said, his voice steady, but there was a hint of unease beneath the words. She nodded, flipping a page in her folder. "Interesting, because the footage tells a very different story." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge raised an eyebrow, the jury leaned in, and Daniel's own attorney shifted uncomfortably. The lawyer turned to the screen beside the judge's bench. "With the court's permission, I'd like to play Exhibit A." Daniel's stomach twisted. He didn't know what was about to be shown, but judging by the way she stood, confident and unwavering, he knew one thing: he wasn't ready for what was coming next. The judge gave a small nod, and the screen flickered to life. The courtroom fell into an eerie silence as the footage began to play. Daniels gripped the edge of the witness stand, his mind racing. He had been sure that night was just another routine encounter, nothing that could come back to haunt him. But as the grainy video unfolded, his heart sank. The footage wasn't just from a street camera, it was from multiple angles, showing everything in crystal clear detail. The lawyer let the video play without saying a word, giving the room time to absorb what they were seeing. Daniel shifted in his seat, his throat dry. He had testified moments ago that he had followed procedure, treated everyone fairly. But now, on screen, the truth was playing out for everyone to see. Then, just when he thought it couldn't get worse, the video cut to a different clip, one he hadn't expected. This footage wasn't from a street camera. It was bodycam footage. His bodycam footage. His pulse pounded in his ears as the sound of his own voice echoed through the courtroom, words he barely even remembered saying. But there they were, recorded and undeniable. And in that moment, he realized he wasn't just losing control of the case. He was about to lose everything. The courtroom was frozen in silence. All eyes were locked on the screen as Officer Daniel's own voice played back for everyone to hear. The arrogance, the dismissive tone, the clear disregard, it was all there, undeniable and damning. He could feel the weight of the jury's stares, the judge's expression growing colder by the second. His attorney shifted beside him, but there was no saving this. He had testified under oath that he followed protocol, but now, with his own words contradicting him, the truth was out. The young lawyer let the moment hang in the air before finally stepping forward. "Officer Daniels, do you still stand by your testimony?" Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, one that told him she already knew the answer. He opened his mouth, searching for a way out, but nothing came. He couldn't deny the video. He couldn't twist the truth. He was trapped. Then, just when it seemed like it was over, she dropped one final bombshell. "One more thing, Your Honor," she said, turning back to the judge. "I'd like to introduce a new witness." The doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and a familiar figure stepped inside. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't seen this person since that night, the night he thought no one would ever question. But now they were here, ready to speak. And with their testimony, there would be no escaping the truth. Daniel's face went pale as the witness stepped forward. The lawyer didn't even have to say their name. The reaction on his face said it all. The person he had tried to intimidate that night, the one he thought would never have a voice, was now standing in front of the entire courtroom, ready to speak. The witness took a deep breath and began recounting the events of that night. Every detail lined up with the footage, exposing the truth Daniels had tried so hard to bury. His attorney made a weak attempt to object, but it was no use. The evidence was overwhelming, and the jury had already made up their minds. The judge turned to Daniels, his expression firm. "Officer Daniels, based on the evidence presented today, your testimony is not only inaccurate but misleading. There will be consequences for this." The weight of those words settled heavily on his shoulders. He had walked into this courtroom expecting another easy win. But now his career, his reputation, everything was crumbling before him. As the lawyer gathered her papers, she glanced at him one last time. "Next time," she said calmly, "think twice before underestimating someone." Then she walked away, leaving him to face the consequences of his own actions.